Hey there, Bears fans. It's finally Friday. The weekend is just about here. But before you get to it, it's time for another episode of the CHGO Bears podcast presented by PointsBet. Use promo code CHGO when you sign up to get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000. What is going on? I'm your host today, Will DeWitt. Nicholas Moreano is here per usual. And today is officially a Chicago Audible reunion. That's right. That's not even an April Fool's joke because Mason West is here too. Mason, I'm just so happy to have you on. And like I said in the tweet right before we went live, the band is back together.
I'm so excited to be here. I've had some withdrawals, right? Having my crazy, ridiculous Bears takes not heard by people and having these conversations back and forth with you guys. So it's awesome to be here. I'm excited to get into this.
Yeah, me too. I've obviously with like our personal lives and how all of this has kind of changed. I had that paternity leave for a while and then we make this transition. So you and I, it's been a while almost since we've been into like a full groove, like November. So this is, an exciting time for all of us. Nick, how does it feel to have, you, me and Mason sitting here virtually? It feels like old times.
It does feel like old times. This is how, the good old Audible days. And obviously things have changed like you guys just relayed earlier, but it's good to be back, talking Bears on a Friday. We got Mason to, get away from his daily work activities to talk some Bears football. So you can't go wrong there.
And he's already getting a lot of love in the chat. I see it already rolling in. People have seriously missed Mason. It's not just Nick and I, like the audience too. They check in on you, all the time, man. You want to let people know, like, what have you been up to this past month? It's been, a whirlwind over here, but what's been going on in, Mason's world?
Yeah. So first of all, thanks to everyone in the chat who've, slid into my DMs, mentions, Instagram, Twitter, all those things being like, hey, where you at? When you going to come back? Miss you. I really love the love. It's awesome. Miss you guys too. So, hopefully every once in a while I get to pop on and do something like this and connect with you, but not too bad. Like obviously main job, physical therapy, gotta get people right, get people going. I've had a lot of cool experiences following the combine because I got to meet a lot of cool people, met some agents, met some players, met some coaches. So got to talk to them a lot and try to keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on with this free agency period. And it's a really fun time, actually, even off camera.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. And you mentioned it, the free agency period for the Bears, it's been a little slow. I think we all know that's been the case. I'm just curious to your thoughts in general, like, and how it's unfolded. Are you all right with this, calculated and slow kind of, approach that polls have been kind of, going with over this past month?
I think I tweeted out a couple of weeks ago something to the effect of, it's hard to build a house when you're just building out of sticks and all the rest of the teams are using bricks to do it. And that's really what's going on here, right? I mean, you look at the amount of dead cap space that's not on polls, right? That was previous regimes setting that up. You look at, what's just going around, with things like that nature. It's hard to build a team like that. I mean, you could try to do a quick turnaround, but then you end up in funky scenarios. If you look at like what's going on with the Jaguars, I don't want anything to do with what they're doing. In theory, they're building around Trevor Lawrence, but they're overpaying guys. Christian Kirk getting way more money than they need to. Same on the defensive side, and there's been a couple of missteps here and there. You could obviously argue, but I would much rather they try to get these guys who have something to prove. Right, they're on the ascension versus they're on their way down. They're affordable, and that way you can make moves in the future, but you can still gauge what's going on. I personally don't necessarily think that the moves are setting up Justin to fail, the Bears to fail. We're going to still get to see what Justin can do. We're still going to get to see what some of these younger players can do. We're just doing it in a slower pace. And in this instant gratification society, it's hard to slow your roll a little bit. Yep. But, you look at what was even available. Let's just take wide receiver. The main guys were off the board before free agency even started. Devontae wasn't available. Chris Godwin wasn't available. Adam Robinson was never coming back. What do you want them to do with what you have? You play it slow.
Yeah, for sure. We actually have a super chat that I want to throw up here on the screen if we can. And I want to know, like, Mason, like something that kind of got you started even on our podcast was that physical therapy perspective. And, Cass wants to know, like, from the Og and Joby situation, what can you let us know from that side, the recovery side?
Yeah, absolutely. So especially when you have someone who plays the position he plays, right? He's a larger individual that you have to be able to play there. You really have to worry about that first appendage hitting the ground, right? That foot. That's where you're going to generate a lot of force, and it's really going to be important for you. So when you have a situation like they had, obviously we don't know all the specifics of what's going on there, but they didn't like what they saw. In that process, he wasn't as far as they wanted him to be. It could just be as simple as they looked at an x-ray and saw that, it wasn't healed the way they wanted. They could have seen a lot of atrophy in that leg, like that's going to take a while to build there. So if you're seeing any of those things, well, no, you don't want to pay the guy all that money, those guarantees. You're going to say, hey, let's slow our roll here and see if we can spread it out. Now, polls didn't say no, we're done with him. They said the door is still open there. They still like him as a player. They just need to see where that rehab process is going to get to. And ultimately, when you look at something like that, again, when you have someone as massive as he is, the amount of forces going in there, you need to have that stable base. And if you don't have that, ultimately you're going to have either a reoccurrence of the same issue, or now all of a sudden you have an ACL tear because you have compensations, you have back pain. Bears have dealt with that enough when it comes to Tevin Jenkins. Then you don't need more of that happening.
Yeah.
You got to be conscientious and careful with those things. And from what I've heard, the cutoff that they're going to ultimately have for these physicals and the type of player they're bringing in physicality wise, it's going to be a lot more rigorous than they have been in the past.
No, that's a great answer. And again, that was a great super chat. Well worth it. Thank you for putting that in here for us to kind of get, Mason's perspective, because he always brings some tremendous insight when it comes to like the physical rehab sort of deals here, like that one. Mason, you said there were some missteps. I'm sure that was one of them in your mind. Do you have like a favorite signing so far that Pulse has made?
Oh man, favorite. I would have to go with Byron Pringle for me. I feel like he's got a lot of untapped potential. You could obviously point to the fact that, hey, the Chiefs let him walk and didn't even really bring him back. You could point to the fact that he only had, caught 67 passes for 898 yards over those 3 seasons. But to me, when you're behind a Tyreek Hill and a Travis Kelce, who are these safety blankets for Mahomes, there's a reason why they're, the best of the best in terms of fantasy, because they constantly get fed. It's hard to be that third, arguably even fourth mouth when it on a roster like that. I mean, you even saw last year a guy like Jerick McKinnon got a lot of catches out of the backfield just because of the way that Chiefs offense was set up. So for him, there's a lot of that untapped potential. He's going to be someone that can step in and have to have a larger role than he had previously. You could tell he's a hard worker. You could tell that he's hungry, and the way that he's just open a lot. When you go back and watch film, he gets open and then he gets yards after catch. That was something that we are rallying against previously. Like, what the heck are we going to do? Man, I love that super chat.
Isn't that a great comment?
Why can't any of the receivers catch the ball and get 10 more yards? And that's what he really does. He's able to put a move on and get downfield.
Yeah, like you, I love watching what he can do with the football in his hands, breaking tackles, running through guys. He doesn't go down easy on first contact. But for those listening to podcasts, wondering, like, what was that great comment? Tony said, I heard Pringle plays with a chip on his shoulder. And, that tugs at my heartstrings, definitely in, my realm of, humor for sure. Nick, do you have any questions for Mason in terms of like what's happened over, the past month? Anything that's transpired that you wanted to kind of, pick his brain on?
Yeah, Mason, what do you think of the whole Ryan Bates era for the Bears? It was such a short-lived and, very prosperous kind of era for a short period of time. But what do you think of Ryan Bates and ultimately going back with the Buffalo Bills?
I have never seen so much upset dissent in Bears Twitter over someone that they hadn't heard of, and a couple weeks ago. Like, it's crazy. I feel like I'm a pretty in the know when it comes to this, and I didn't know who he was either until his name got brought up and I went and watched. Now, am I disappointed that he didn't ultimately end up on the Bears? Yeah, he looks like, again, a guy like we've seen with a lot of these people brought in that have a lot of untapped potential. Only played 4 games. I feel like that the contract that was offered was fair. You can't overpay for 4 games. I think, Nick, you had the stat of the number of snaps he had. Like, it's not a lot in any way, shape, or form. Poles did that the way you had to. It was a fair offer. It was a solid offer. The Bills just wanted to match it, and the Bills aren't in a good cap space. The fact that they were willing to match that shows how much they actually did care about this player. So I don't even count that as a miss. That was a calculated effort. You don't have it. You're upset about it, but you move on and you learn even for next free agency period.
So Tony followed it up. Sorry to go back to Pringle real quick, but he said on top of that as well that he runs some really crisp routes, and then I saw another one too that he's going to make from bends opposing DBs salty. So people in the chat are really into the Pringle talk. But Mason, appreciate your thought on Bates as well. I think we all felt very similarly too. But I want to kind of get into our first planned segment here today, which is some forgotten Chicago Bears on this roster, because we're talking about all this influx of new players, players that maybe underperformed a year ago that we're looking to see an elevation in their play. But perhaps there are some other players that fans are just forgetting around this roster that may surprise us entering 2022. I had a DM on Twitter from a listener named Jack, just wondering, hey, could we expect from like a guy like Charles Snowden on this roster? Is he going to step in like as a defensive end? Will they try him out as like the Sam backer? I was like, you know what? Charles Snowden's a player I have not thought about since the season has ended, and it just really kind of got me thinking, like, what other Bears, fit this mold. Do either of you guys actually have an opinion with Charles Snowden and his fit here, whether DE or Sam backer? Because he's super athletic. Mason, you were talking before we went live, like he's raw, has all the potential. I think he can be some clay that the Bears could mold, into whatever role they would envision for him. It's just still a little bit of a road ahead.
Yeah, he is really this tweener. That's the hard part. It's like, just like you said, you could probably slap him in either position and he could probably do relatively well there. The thing that's interesting with that Sam position is in today's NFL, it's not going to be on the field quite as much, right, as it would have been in the past. So maybe that is the best way to have his usage there, just, popping in and out as needed versus having to depend on him truly as that defensive end. And at this point, when you bring in a guy also like, Al-Qadim Muhammad, like he's going to slide in really well into that defensive end. You still have Gibson that's going to be there. He's going to be pretty far down that pecking order. There seems to be, at least right now, how the roster is constructed, more opportunity at that linebacker position. So why not let him be this Sam athletic, just match him up in a way? Like, this isn't exactly the perfect scenario, but like how Jalen Ramsey was just used around the field to create mismatches. I think you could use him to create some solid mismatches on the line, and then against some slower tight ends. Let's not put him up against George Kittle.
I saw Team Horsted in the chat from Matt. Everyone knows I'm all about the Horsted hype. Definitely not anyone I'm ever going to be forgetting is on this roster. Nick, who else do the Bears have that maybe fans are forgetting about that, come training camp, preseason, that, there'll be all the talk of the town?
It might be the punter, Ryan Winslow, right now, you guys, with Pat O'Donnell no longer on the roster, going to Green Bay. Like, that's the only punter on the Bears roster, and this is the perfect opportunity to talk about a punter because, again, he's the guy as it kind of goes into right now. He's entering his 5th season. He's played only 5 career games, played 2 with the Cardinals, 2 with the Panthers, and then 1 with the Commanders. So it's a guy that doesn't have that much experience, but when I look at the roster and opportunities, he's the first one on the depth chart right now. So that's one of the guys that I look at as being someone that, hey, you have to really scroll through the Bears roster to even find out, oh, there's a Ryan Winslow. And he's there, and he's currently the only Bears punter on the roster. So I went with him.
All right. I can get on board with that. It may not be the only punter talk that comes up in this episode, so stay tuned for that. Mason, give me another name.
Oh, I'm stuck between 2. All right, I'm going to go with Caleb Johnson.
All right.
I was a bit of a Caleb Johnson stan at the beginning of the year. If I recall correctly, I think I called him to make the final 53, and Will said to me, there's no way that this man will make this roster. And it got turned around on him.
Me?
Yeah, you. He played in 14 games as a rookie, mainly on special teams. He had 4 solo tackles there. But He had seven tackles on special teams, actually, and 1 fumble recovery. And we actually did see a little bit of a dip that occurred on that special teams coverage when he got hurt earlier in the year. So he was someone that was very, very active in that role. And like we just talked about, also, that linebacker position is going to be a little in flux in terms of a Sam. Can you bring him in? Is he just a solid depth piece? I think he's someone that at least the last regime liked. And again, he's a pretty athletic guy. He could actually make some hay moving forward here.
Yeah, again, we talked about Charles Snowden. Like, does he slide into a Sam? I think Caleb Johnson's one that I would almost say I'm more intrigued by because the Bears had him as, a backup inside linebacker last season, making the team just due to that special teams, prowess that he brought down there. Like you said, on kickoff coverages, he was always the first one to the football. Like, that dude has a nose for it. He's fast. He's athletic. And of course he likes to, lay down the hits too. So Caleb Johnson's one that was on my list for those reasons. And if they can, coach him up a bit, maybe he would be that player to come in those spot situations for a Sam Becker. Is that your phone, Mason?
Yeah, I'm in my back office and apparently this decided to ring. Super fun.
I was like, either that's like a soundbite that I have not heard yet on this podcast and I'm about to see what the producer is going to say, or someone's getting a phone call.
Yeah, that apparently still, I forgot to mute that. Physical therapy office is going to get some calls, but now it's muted. So,
so we're good. All right, so we got Caleb.
People need some help though, Mason. People might need some help. They're like, "Hey, Mason's not answering the phone. What the hell's going on here?"
It's Larry O hitting me up. He wants to come in the clinic, get right, so we can turn it around.
Hey, he was watching the
live.
Answer that one. Yeah, he took no time. You should answer it if it was Larry Ogunjobi calling you. So we talked about Caleb Johnson, Charles Snowden. Nick went over with the punter as well. What about a guy like Daz Newsome? We keep talking about all of the receivers that the Bears don't have and that we're looking to keep adding to, this team. We've already done Pringle. Everyone's looking at the early portion of the draft as an area where the Bears should be addressing this need. But can a guy like a Daz Newsome who, played really well and is a little bit of time, especially someone who's like kind of making headway, but as the injury concerns, and unfortunately for the previous regime, they didn't like playing rookies. So he didn't even get good experience when the season was already a wash, which still threw all of us for a loop. So he's someone that I wonder, with a different pair of eyes on him, evaluating him, will he get a opportunity to carve a role in this Bears offense? And I know, Mason, you were really big on Daz entering, last training camp as well. Do you expect him to, get a chance?
I think he almost has to, at least how they're currently set up, right? I mean, if you look at the receivers on the roster, it's kind of Mooney. It's Mooney and everyone else. I mean, like I said, I do like Byron Pringle. I think he's going to actually be pretty solid here. But, you're hoping you're going to bring in a draft pick. But he should be able to contribute in some way, shape, or form. One of the bigger areas might be on that punt return, right? Like, that's going to be something that needs to be supplanted. That was something that he did the preseason. And, you have a guy that has NFL experience, even if it's mainly on the practice squad. You're going to probably, I would think, lean that direction early on, especially depending on the wide receiver or quality thereof that you might get in the draft. So he's going to have his chances. It's, can he take advantage of them? And can he create a chemistry with Justin Fields? Because at the end of the day, whoever creates the chemistry with Justin over the summer should be the ones that get the looks.
I like that you said should, because we all know what happened last training camp with Jesse James, and that did not happen. A huge mistake by the Bears last year. Nick, is there any other forgotten Bears that we need to, remember who's there?
There's only one other name that I have on my list, and it's Dieter Easelin, the offensive lineman out of Yale. He's a guy that, I got to see up close in personal. He was working out with James Daniels, who obviously went to the Pittsburgh Steelers, but a guy is a hard worker. There's a vacancy spot at the right guard position. Not to say that, hey, Eastland's a guy that takes that and you're good to go, but maybe that's a guy that the Bears look at, see his work ethic, and everyone's on a clean slate, right? With this new coaching staff coming in. So maybe you could see how that kind of works.
Oh, super clean slate. I was telling you that if you go to the Chicago Bears website right now, their roster under experience, that column, everyone besides the new safety is listed as a rookie. Yeah. So it's all new. Everyone's a rookie in this regime's eyes, apparently, or maybe their web developer messed something up. It's one of the two.
Who knows? We'll never know. But hey, maybe that's an indication. Like, everyone, look, we're starting from scratch. You show us what you can do. You'll get on the field. That's going to play into that hits philosophy, and maybe that'll work out for some of these bottom end guys that we're kind of talking about here.
I see John in the comments, wondering about a Jeremiah Atachu and can he play defensive end? When he was in Denver, he didn't, but I did go back further in his career when he played for the Chargers and he did. So he is someone that can still play that position. I wonder how effective he can be. I know he's coming off, I believe it's a torn pec. So that does take time to come back from. And if he's already behind the 8 ball a bit throughout this offseason and OTAs, how does that kind of, shift out? But as of right now, he is a Chicago Bear. They haven't decided to let him go. So I would be, I'm intrigued by how he may fit. I would see him more as a defensive end than like a Sam linebacker. So I would say yes, but I'm cautious to say he'd be, a major part of the rotation. And this is a guy that I had a lot of expectation for entering last season. So it's unfortunate that my perspective has changed just a little bit on him. But as you guys know on the show, I've always said, keep some expectations low and let them exceed. And that's what I'm going to do here with Natachu. Same thing on defense, though. Guys like a Sam Kamara and Ladarius Mack. We still have Little Mac on this roster. Hey.
He's still there.
He exists. I'm not sure how long, but he exists.
Any other guys between the both of you that you believe kind of falls into this category? My list is completely checked off. I saw Thomas Graham in the comments, but we've talked about him so much on this podcast. He is not a forgotten man whatsoever. But how about you guys? Anyone else you wanted to bring up before we move on?
No one else that kind of fits that bottom end. But before we kind of move on to our next segment here, do want to address one of the super chats that we got from Aaron Owens. Big shout out to CHGO for getting the gang back together. Money Mace is back. What's your guys' thoughts on bringing in Landry? I assume Jarvis Landry, and then with a draft pick. Jarvis Landry is an interesting player for me because I think what the Bears lack right now in that wide receiver room, one are bodies. That'd be the first thing they lack, but a veteran presence. There's nobody outside of Darnell Mooney's I guess Byron Pringle has one more year of experience, but that's your guy. That's your veteran that you're trying to, mold this group with. But it all depends what Jarvis Landry kind of wants at this point in his career. Like, he's probably going to cost, I think, more money than you're willing to spend on a guy like that. But, he can work from the slot, is that veteran presence, has been pretty productive outside of last year when he had to deal with some injuries. But if you tag that along with a draft pick, okay, then you kind of see this wide receiver room starting to take shape. But I think the money is going to be a little bit out of the realm for the Bears willing to spend, because we've seen already they're not dishing out a lot of cash for a lot of guys right now.
Nope. Still sitting with 11th in the NFL with cap space available, though. So there is cash to be spent if they determine, the ideal place for it to go. Mason, any thoughts on this super chat before we move on?
I would also think a big thing would be they want to be competitive, I would think. I mean, he's a veteran who, I don't know, who knows how many years he has left at this particular level. Wouldn't he want to go to a team that isn't in this retool, arguably rebuild phase? Or is he okay being more of that mentor role for, as Nick said, probably going to have to be a little bit cheaper money? He didn't have a great end there with the Browns. He could maybe do like a 1-year deal with someone like a Justin Fields and refurb that the image he has and try to get another contract after that. But other than that, it might be hard to bring a guy like that in here.
For sure. All right. So up next, Nick and I are going to go back on the clock to finish the mock drafts that we started earlier this week. But I just need to let you know that the best way that you can support CHGO is to download the PointsBet app and use the code CHGO when you sign up. And if you do that right now, you'll get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000. But that's not it. You can, if you also make a $50 or more first-time deposit, you'll receive a free CHGO membership, which unlocks all of our web content. I actually dropped an article about Marcus Jones here today that you should definitely check out. And you'll even get a free shirt of your choice from the CHGO locker. That's $2,000 in free bets, a free CHGO membership, and a free t-shirt from the CHGO locker, all for making a more than $50 first-time deposit at PointsBet. And if you have any questions, please email pointsbet@allchgo.com and we'll help you out. Your home for live in-play betting just got even better. Introducing PointsBet's new feature, Live College Basketball Same Game Parlay. For the first time ever, you can build the perfect live same game parlay only with PointsBet. Combine your favorite bets anytime during the game. And if you want more, you can also boost your live same game parlay. So you can watch live, parlay live, and boost live with PointsBet. And now online signup is available in Illinois. You can download the PointsBet app right now and register your account from start to finish, all from your phone. Plus, during PointsBet Match Madness, all users can earn up to $100 in free bets during each round. Just place a $50 pregame wager and get a free $20 live bet to be used for that round. So what are you waiting for? Once the game starts, don't just bet. Live your bet life with PointsBet. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700.
I like the chat right now, Will. They're still waiting to see if Olin has approved of Mason. And then the last one from Bear With Me. Okay, he could get a pass for today. Only got to see how Olin approves his handshake. So go back to the very first episode. So awesome. I love the conversations in this chat. They've been great ever since we started CHGO.
100%. Nick, do you have any reads yourself, or do we move on?
Next segment, second part is where I tell you all about the great. I can tell you about CHGO right now, but I'll save it for the next part.
Sounds great. Just wanted to make sure. I don't like to assume and make those mistakes. But Nick, we are back on the clock. And Mason, if you want to be on the clock too, as I told you, yesterday as we were kind of preparing the show, feel free to kind of join in with your thoughts here. But Nick and I, we have a mock draft that we need to kind of finish up. So the Bears are on the clock at 150, and we have some guys to kind of choose from. We have Verone McKinley, the third, the safety out of Oregon, Matt Ariza, the punter out of San Diego State, Zamir White, the running back out of Georgia, Ioma Uwazurike, the defensive tackle out of Iowa State, and Garrett Prince, the tight end out of UAB. Nick, do you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, so with pick 150, I'm going with my guy, Ioma Uwazurike, Iowa State, representing there the Cyclones, even though, as you all know, I graduated from the University of Iowa. But I was able to watch a couple of games from Uwazurike last night, and what I like about him is that he's constantly moving his feet and driving linemen back. He's got a high motor. I think that fits what the Bears are trying to bring to this new defense. So I like that about him. Does also provide some versatility, having played on each position for that Cyclones defensive line. So hey, whether it's in an odd front, even front, he's had experience actually doing all of that there with the Iowa State Cyclones. In 13 games last season there, Will and Mason, he had 42 tackles, 12 tackles for loss, and 9 sacks. So not only has he shown that he can be durable playing the 13 games and obviously a shorter season than the NFL, but being productive there as well and using his hands. Like there was a lot of times where linemen obviously are trying to get their hands on Uwazurike, but he kind of just grabs him by the wrist. He's like, all right, let's dance and kind of move you backwards and go get the quarterback. So I do like that a lot from a guy that, at pick 150, you're not asking him to go in there and be a key part of the rotation, but can he develop, especially having that versatility? That would be, I think, a good pick there. The one thing that I would say is his knock. It's not a lot of upfield bursts. He's not going to be a guy who's going to constantly beat a lineman off the snap and kind of get that jump. But can you work with all the other intangibles that he has? I think the Bears could.
I like it. He actually was someone I did with my post Khalil Mack trade mock draft. So he is someone that, I like as well. And I did my minute mock on Twitter, and you better believe it took me like 100 times to pronounce that last name quick enough to fit it within my minute video as well. But going over to my pick and who I would take here, I'm going to go with Garrett Prince, the tight end. He's a wide receiver who did convert over to tight end. This experience, when you watch him, is fully on display. He has the knack of just running, away from defenders with a mix of speed, burst, and route running. He's effective on those short, intermediate, and deep routes. So he can be a threat in all three levels of the field. He has that vertical seam presence and impact. That receiving experience has really helped him kind of track some of those deeper balls. You'll see him, running in stride, looking over his shoulder right down the middle of the field with two defenders on him, and just track that ball, catch it over his shoulder without missing a beat, and just keep on moving. So he can be a security blanket type of player over the middle for Justin Fields. And if pairing him with my very first pick of this mock draft, Sky Moore, that gives Justin two guys that can make their damage done, in between the hashes. He's been used all over, out wide, in line, the backfield. A real versatile player. He has a nose for the end zone, 10 touchdowns last season. And when I was looking at some interviews he's done for this draft process, he just mentioned the rush of making those big plays. And he said, and I quote, "It makes me feel alive." So I love having a guy with that sort of attitude. Some of the bad, it's not even that big of a deal to me, but he is a little bit of a slender build. He has a slim body. He's not built like a traditional tight end, but more like a big bodied possession wide receiver. So more like a Kyle Pitts as well. He's 1 inch shorter, 7 pounds lighter than Pitts is as well. And the reason why I would make this pick, the Bears bring in a versatile player who can make a variety of plays for this offense. He can carve defenses up underneath on those crossing routes and make some of those tackles miss and then run away from those defenders from those yards after the catch. Deep threat at the position down the seam. Cole Kmet, as we know, has not proved he has that ability right now. And perhaps this is a guy that's flying under the radar as well. He wasn't even invited to the combine, but he is fast, 4.68 40, which would have ranked, I think, 5th at the position at the combine as well. So by going with this guy, the Bears get younger and faster at the tight end position and perhaps also find a diamond in the rough or a day 3 steal. Big fan of Garrett here. Mason, what would you do?
So assuming that I have done these fantastic picks all the way up till now, because we know that it would, what I had said is probably going to be what the Bears do. That's why I haven't said it yet. I don't want to give it away. So at this slot, what I would do is go with Matt Araiza, the punter.
Okay.
I truly believe there's going to be some trade backs. I think that they're going to be able to acquire some more picks, and therefore you can justify doing something like this. And when you see what Araiza can do, like the ability to pin a team like he can, I mean, he can flip the field from your own 20. So like I would absolutely take him here. And that's the thing too, is I mean, yes, you're investing a draft pick here. Do you draft a punter? I mean, it's almost this gross thought that a lot of people have when it comes to something like that. But at the end of the day, if it's a weapon for you, if you can actually, like I said, flip the field like that and now have to make your opponents drive from their 10. And I don't know if you saw the highlight from the combine where he got that one to settle on the 1 after I think it's like some 60 booming yard kick. Like, I want that person on my team. So when it's people downplay the special teams all the time, it's always offense, a little bit of defense, and special teams is way at the bottom. But when it's someone like that, I think you have to at least make a serious consideration, especially with the picks that I made that you all know are perfect before this.
Yeah, they just matched mine. That's all it was.
Oh, no, not even close. Not even close.
All right. I like that pick a lot, which leads us to pick 186. And again, for everyone's reference, Nick and I ran multiple simulations with the mock draft simulator on the Draft Network, and we just took some of the best players that were available at each and every pick. So let's see who's available at 186. Hey, Araiza is still there. Then you also have Romeo Doubs, the wide receiver out of Nevada. Colt Turner, the tight end out of Nevada. Mike Rose, a linebacker out of Iowa State, and then Chris Paul, not the basketball player, but the offensive lineman out of Tulsa. So getting into my pick here, Mason, I'll make you proud. I'm going to go with the punt god. That's right. He remained available, and we were talking about him 3 picks ago. The fact that he's still here, I cannot pass him up. Mason, he hit it. Rare punting power. He had 18 punts last year, 60 plus, and 2 of them that went for more than 80 yards. And I was looking at those 80-yard punts. One of them, he was halfway inside of his own end zone. Okay. Punting halfway inside of his own end zone. Do you know where that ball is downed? At the opponent's 4. That's nuts. That is like insane field flipping capabilities. And it's not just the fact that he has a boot as well. He can do a good job in terms of like punting with his coverage units. I think his net average was 50, which led the entire NCAA last year. And he can also partake on kickoffs. 62 of his 73 kickoffs went for touchbacks last season. He's a decent athlete. You can tell he used to play soccer. That athletic profile is on full display. He gets downfield in a hurry. And I love that he's not shy getting in on the tackle. He's someone that definitely would like to, go ahead and lay down some hits too himself, which you don't always see that from the punting position. If you're looking at some areas where he needs to clean up, he can get a little better at like some coffin corner punch. So if he wants to call a guy like Brad Maynard and like, hey, can you coach me up a bit? Definitely would not be a bad idea whatsoever. And, on top of that, too, he needs to work on his flow just a bit to give his gunners a little bit more time. His mechanics back there are a little quick, so that ball's out in a hurry. He doesn't really go for a lot of hang time either. His punts are a little bit more on, like the straighter trajectory. So that may lead to some issues in the NFL with these more experienced and dynamic returners by making him pay. So you have to kind of find that symbiotic relationship between what he can do with his leg traits as well as those coverage units. But, the Bears lost O'Donnell. They only have Winslow on the roster right now. If you can go from a mega punt to a punt god, that sounds like an upgrade. Again, a guy who can flip the field, and the Bears defense should be starting with some great field position consistently if the Bears offense struggles. So I doubt he actually falls, all the way to, 186 here. But if he did, home run hit here for the Chicago Bears. Nick?
So a couple things here. Going back to Joe's comment earlier, we're not punting, Will. So what do we need a punter for, right? We are not punting anymore because we have Luke Getsy and this scheme that the Bears keep trying to sell us on. But to go, and another thing, Olin Kreutz is texting me right now saying what shirt size he is. I asked him, so now I'm like lost in my notes here. But got it here. I am taking at pick 186, Colt Turner, the tight end out of Nevada. He was a former wide receiver and actually just recently switched positions for the 2020 season. And Will, when you had like these 5 guys that we could select, I'm like, why do I know the name Colt Turner? Like, what is it about him that, like, why do I know him? I talked to him at the freaking NFL scouting combine. I completely forgot. And we just go through so many guys there. It's like, oh yeah, I was at his podium. I asked him a couple questions and you just forget about it. Like I have all of his audio and stuff. So that's why the name ring a bell. But look, switching over from wide receiver to tight end that first season in 9 games, he had 9 receiving touchdowns. Go to the second season now that he's at the position. So last season in 11 starts, he had 62 receptions, 677 yards, 10 touchdowns. So the guy has a knack for getting into the end zone. But what you see on his film, hands catcher, pretty good body control for being somebody that big at 6'6", 246, and a jump ball tight end. There was a lot of times they split him out wide. Very reminiscent of what you would see the Bears do with Jimmy Graham, one-on-one isolated with a cornerback, and used his height to box out defenders, get him out of the way. And he does have a background playing high school basketball. So it seemed pretty fluid how he was able to make that transition there. Things he needs to work on at 6'6", 246. You want to see him just get, I think, a little bit more bulky in terms of just adding some muscle mass. And although he did make some incredible catches, and like I said, a hands catcher, some of those more difficult catches where he's able to use that height, go above the rim, so to speak, he needs to just be more consistent in coming down with those. Because if he could do that, there was a bunch of times where he's running down the seam in between that linebacker safety, just able to find the pocket there, just make the secure catch. But if he can be more consistent in making the difficult ones, that's how you make your name for yourself in the NFL. So giving Justin Fields another tight end to kind of work with and somebody with that height, that could maybe prove dividends later on. Like, I don't think Colt Turner is going to come in here and immediately contribute. It's going to take some time, obviously. So, but out of those 5, I thought Colt Turner would be a nice pick to add to this Bears roster.
You see that comment from Davis Orr? How many Coles do we need at tight end, Nick?
That's true. You can add another one apparently in my mock draft, so you need 2 at least.
At least 2. Mason, given this group of players, your perfect mock draft up to this point, how would you cap it off?
It's funny. I have no idea what y'all picked before this, but I also picked Turner. I thought that from those players that were sitting there, there's some raw untapped potential that's there. That body type, jump ball, tight end. We saw what that was when it was semi-useful, when you had the Jimmy Graham situation. Younger legs here might be nice. The negative I think for Cole is that he's going to be pretty limited in terms of blocking and special teams. So you're not necessarily going to get that right away, which, your later picks tend to really fill out that special teams area. So is that ultimately a problem? But with that basketball background, he plays with this confidence and a swagger to him. Like, he knows that ball is his. He knows he's one of the most athletic guys on the field. Like Nick said, 10 touchdown catches. I mean, that's just a machine from that. Pretty athletic, flexible to catch outside his frame. So he's going to be able to get those balls, that are a little tougher to catch and expand that catch radius. Linebackers can stack and play through him, though. He plays with relatively narrow base, so sometimes he can get a little tipsy, fall over on some of those routes if he gets jammed by a linebacker type. And that really tight coverage can really be funky for him. But again, the radius can help with that. We've seen what Justin did previously, in college with tight ends. He hasn't really had that option so far in that first year. So can we give him someone that might be able to finally tamper down some of that Horsted hype?
Hey. Hey, I see
I like
Mule in
a
the
little
chat.
jab.
Horsted needs to be given a chance. Can't agree, any more than I've already have for months here on the show. But let's recap our draft classes so that way for people who maybe missed it, like Mason earlier this week, they know, hey, what did we actually freaking do this week? So my draft class this week, I did Sky Moore, the receiver, Jamari Salyer, the interior offensive lineman. One of my favorite prospects in this draft right now, Marcus Jones, the corner out of Houston, a awesome tackle project with all the tools that you're looking for in Dare Rosenthal. And then, as of course, we went through here today, Garrett Prince, the tight end, and then Areza, the punter. So a lot of help for Justin Fields, both, as a receiver, for a tight end. He has his offensive lineman. He has his potential long-term starter at left tackle. And then I sprinkled in with a dynamic playmaker on defense that can also help Justin Fields because he can play wide receiver. So every single pick, heck, I'm going to say Matt Areza can help Justin Fields too. Every pick goes back to helping Justin long-term. So that's my draft class for this week. Nick, you want to share yours again?
Yeah, we'll get that graphic up here. We got Kyler Gordon out of Washington, the cornerback, to play alongside Jalen Johnson. Just add an athlete back there, just to really help. I think opposing offenses go look at the Bears defense like, yeah, we're going to target the guy opposite 33. That won't be the case with Kyler Gordon there. Add David Bell. I know there's a lot of people that are not really high on David Bell because he's quote unquote slow and didn't put a lot of really good combine numbers up. Man can play football. That's what counts the most. I also got Darren Canard, who is projected, or he played right tackle at Memphis, or Kentucky, and then you can move him into, I think, right guard. That's where a lot of people haven't projected. So that's where I'm kind of seeing him filling out for the Bears team. Yeah, Brian Cook, hard-hitting safety. One of our listeners said a heat-seeking missile. That's exactly how. It's a really good description for Brian Cook there. And then we just talked about the last two guys on my list, Ioma Owazurike, the defensive tackle out of Iowa State, someone that just adds to that defensive line rotation. And it's going to be someone that's going to have to wait and kind of build up how he needs to play the position, what he actually is going to play in the NFL. So he has some time to kind of grow there. And same thing can be said for kind of Colt Turner. We know he has that touchdown production, but you got to get acclimated to the NFL. It's a little different playing that style at Nevada and now having to do it in the NFL. So like you, Will, I thought I did what was in the best interest of the team, adding some weapons for Justin Fields. But that other cornerback spot, I really wanted to get a guy there so that when the Bears do play some of these explosive offenses in the NFL, like they're going to feel good about what they can put out there in terms of the cornerbacks that they have.
Absolutely. And you asked me on Tuesday in studio, like, is it okay to be selfish and kind of build more around Justin and take some of these picks and really kind of, go in that direction? And I told you after those first two picks, apparently I'm selfish. And I think as the week unfolded, I continued to only prove that I am in the sense of building this team around Justin.
Yeah, for sure. Mason, I mean, I know you just kind of saw the graphics there, but you could just tell the listeners why I had the better mock draft, and then we can move on to our last section of the show.
Well, honestly, I probably would lean towards yours, Nick, but you don't have punt god, so I can't say
we're not
that
putting. We're not putting anymore. We're not putting. Remember, putting is not a thing with the Bears. It's 2022 now.
And it's funny, like I got a list of guys just in my head that I have is like, man, if we could get these players in the Bears, I would absolutely love that draft. And y'all didn't have a lot of my players, so I think that there is a little dissent among the ranks.
Ooh, do you want to give us like a quick summary of who those players are?
I don't know if I can do that. I think there's a whole segment coming up later that we're talking about it.
All right. Well, that'll work. So I just want to let people know, like, hey, if you enjoy CHGO, one way that you can help us continue to grow is to download the PointsBet app and use the code CHGO when you sign up. Not only are you going to get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000, but if you make a $50 or more first-time deposit, you'll receive a free CHGO membership, which unlocks all of our web content, and you'll even get a free shirt of your choice from the CHGO locker. If you have any questions, email pointsbet@allchgo.com, and we'll help you out. And in case you missed it, online signup is available in Illinois. You can actually download the PointsBet app right now and register your account from start to finish, all from your phone. You'll be signing up with the fastest sportsbook, and it's easier than ever. So you can start living your bet life in seconds. So what are you waiting for? Once the game starts, don't just bet, live your bet life with PointsBet. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700.
All right, Chicago sports fans, if you aren't a member of our CHGO family, what are you waiting for at this point? Members will have access to all of our premium content from all of our great writers. You also get a free t-shirt of your choice when you become a member. And I saw those t-shirts. They are fire. If this was Olin Kreutz, he'd say he's got all this drip now. Like, you need to look into these t-shirts that we have here at CHGO, and you can get a free one if you become a member. And you get access to our members only Discord, the CHGO Lounge. And of course, we have podcasts like this one, whether they're virtual, in person, and all Chicago's teams, every team, every day. So go check that out. So come join this amazing family that is constantly growing here at CHGO.
Awesome. You're listening to the CHGO Bears podcast. Will DeWitt, Nicholas Moreano, and Mason West, a little Chicago Audible reunion here to kind of end your week. And Mason, everyone in the chat's like, just give it up, man. Give it up. Who do you like in this draft?
So t-shirt apparently too.
Yeah, it's a great t-shirt. Look at that. Boom.
It is. That's awesome.
I was looking around for some CHGO gear to throw on. I realized I literally don't have a single thing from CHGO. So apparently at some point I need to change that.
Absolutely. Hey, I don't even have my CHGO shirt yet, so you're not that far behind.
Oh, great. Good.
They're being shipped right now, actually.
So in terms of some prospects that I really like, now keep in mind, these are just a cluster of some guys that I think that could really help the Bears right away. Some of them I'm going to say are absolutely Nick's chain too much drip. That's awesome. That are absolutely like my draft crushes, and they're going to be around at various places. So first and foremost, really, and this is kind of going in order in terms of where they might be available in the draft. George Pickens out of Georgia, he should be a first round wide receiver. But the problem is he had that ACL tear. I mean, that's why he fell. But he's a guy that is a long wide receiver that can play on the perimeter, has amazing ball skills. I mean, his first year at Georgia, he was on the all freshman team and led the team with 49 catches, 727 yards, and 8 touchdowns. I mean, that's a pretty dynamic player. And then he came back and still contributed even after that ACL tear. So, you've probably heard me on back at Chicago Audible talk about how detrimental those ACL tears can be. We've talked about him, but he already showed that he has the start there. And also it seems like the Bears are shifting their medical focus. So I'd be more comfortable taking a guy like that. Now, he does have to work on that route tree. It's kind of one dimensional in terms of playing on the outside. But I mean, talk about a guy that could come in and give Justin a real weapon right away. I mean, absolutely. That's someone that I would look at. Now, someone else that falls into kind of a different wide receiver category a little later in the draft, who's moving up board, is going to be Calvin Austin III out of Memphis. And I know Bears fans might not really want to dip their toe in the Memphis wide receiver water again. I understand that. There's a support group for that because you got to get behind Calvin Austin. He is a dynamic weapon. Somebody who just blew up the charts when it comes to stats. When he was at Memphis, he's proven that he can handle catch and run, something that Bears receivers have not been able to do recently. He has rapid foot quickness, loose hips, and really should be able to play really well out of the slot. His lack of size show up in some of those contested balls, but he's just someone that can be used as a weapon. I mean, he's going to be someone that you can slide around and plug and play at various points of the defense. Your creativity is the only thing that's going to limit you when it comes to someone like that. So Calvin Austin's a guy that, for me, especially if you do trade back, maybe you can collect another pick, 3rd, 4th round, that's a guy that I would absolutely be looking at just to give a little explosion to an offense that in the past has not been quite so explosive. So what do you guys think so far about those first two?
I'm a big fan, of Pickens. I know Nick and I have had some, good discussions about him. And again, it's actually how crazy is it that he came back healthy from that ACL tear? 5 months, Mason?
I'm usually someone, the statistics show you are not back at 100% until 2 years. More often than not, you're not productive at 1 year. So the fact that you can come back at 5, I mean, he was on a snap count, all that stuff's understandable. But at the same time, that's pretty amazing. Just in terms of what his mentality is, someone who's going to grind and work hard for you, but also just who he is as an athlete. The fact that he could come back like that and contribute in a pretty large way. I mean, it wasn't like he just had one catch and that was it. I mean, he helped that team.
Yeah, he really did. And when I was doing my research on him, there was a whole scholarly article about the marvel that was his rehab. And the fact that he came back was not a medical mystery, but one of those things how in the world did someone actually do that and be able to play at that high level? And again, pitch count, but still he was out there able to produce, make an impact. And 5 months, I mean, we're a year and a half, and obviously Tariq Cohen never got to a spot where he could even come back, and he's gone now. So that's one where you said it, the mindset, like he wanted to be back and he worked his ass off to make sure he can be there for his team the following season. And I want a guy like that on my roster. So I'm glad you gave him some love here.
Absolutely. A little more rapid fire to some other guys that I'm definitely interested in this draft. Tyler Smith, tackle out of Tulsa. He brings the Eminem thought process for sure. He's a mean guy, just, usually finishes pretty well. Explosive, athletic. Poles talked about how he wants guys who follow more into athletic thought process when it comes to that line. He might move into guard, which would kind of, because his run blocking is really solid. His pass blocking needs some work, but at least you have that option. Luke Fortner, center out of Kentucky, definitely a later pick, but he is a team captain with amazing character. He can play center or guard. First block, he fits the block super well and has an amazing bend to him, and he just is always there. When you watch his film, he's always on the block, and then when he finishes his block, he looks for more work. I mean, that's exactly what you want out of your center, a leader and someone who's going to be there. Sometimes there's some late leakage in pass setting, and he's not the greatest in the screen game. That's something that you can work on. That's something, I don't need my center to have to be able to do that. And then last two guys here, Jeffrey Gunter is, I think, a really interesting edge. He's going to be out of Coastal Carolina. His motor is ridiculously high. I mean, he's going to literally bleed what Flus wants out of that defense. And then someone that's starting to raise up boards. I'm going to say I was the captain of this ship well before the draft, or sort of the combine, was Zion McCollum, cornerback out of Sam Houston State. I mean, his athletic chart is off the charts. 40-yard dash 4.33. His 10-yard split was a 1.46, 39.5 vertical. Pretty amazing there. He is a ball hawking cornerback out of the FCS who has the size that you really want, especially in a defense like this. He plays pretty big. He plays with physicality, really instinctive and great ball skills. He can play press or forms a zone, and he has early special team value too. And we know that cornerback is ultimately something, so that CP2 spot is up for grabs. So being able to snag someone like him maybe a little bit later would be great.
That sounds like a really great list. Nick, any questions or any comments on it?
No, just going back to the Calvin Austin, like I got to see him in person. There's at the Senior Bowl, Christian Watson was there and Calvin Austin was there. Both guys, they were pretty much unguardable, but he, despite being the size that he is, if the Bears can land somebody like that, that's a pure slot receiver, man, that the Bears can definitely utilize, someone that Justin Fields can connect with over the middle of the field and just find those matchups that you like. But Calvin Austin's a guy that I'm really high on as well.
All right. So as both of you know, it's April Fools. It's April 1st, and that means it's also draft month. So we're entering this next stage of the NFL offseason. And I thought a great way to kind of cap off this week of, this podcast would just be to highlight and maybe, briefly discuss some of those burning Bears questions that we have on our mind, entering this month of April. And, Mason, I actually want to go right back to you because when I posed this, you gave me a laundry list. Like, you have so many questions on your mind right now. Which one do you think is like the hottest?
For me personally, it's what is Poles going to do in terms of those first two picks, those second round picks, because you're here. Do you stay there? Do you move back? You hear some people saying, do you move up? There was a little while there where people are like package those picks in another future one, trying to get to like one of some of the Ohio State receivers, which that's insane. Don't do that. Please don't move up. But so to me, it's all about moving down in the draft. There's so much value that's going to sit in those pick areas that, I mean, not to harp on an old regime, but I like the idea still of that cloud. I don't want the Bears drafting for need. Like you can't go into pick 39 saying like, I need a wide receiver here, I need a tackle here, whatever the case may be. You should go into it being like, okay, we have some holes. We want to be able to fill those holes, but how do we do it in an intelligent way? So can you move down from 39, a couple picks, acquire another fifth rounder or something of that nature, still get the receiver, the lineman, a corner even that you want there? And so for me, that's really going to be one of the biggest things is how malleable can you be with those picks?
It's a great question. And I'm really excited to get to the draft. So we'll see exactly how, Ryan Poles will kind of go about things here. Will he trade down from, one of them maybe both of them, and really recoup some of those picks. If he can somehow find his way into 5 picks in the top 125 or something like that, that's a really this interesting scenario for the Bears to be in. If he can go with more of this quantity approach, but also still find that quality of player that you are hoping to get at some of those, positions where they're currently picking right now. And one of my, I guess, bigger questions is, and it doesn't even have to do with the draft, but it could, depending on how it shapes out. Can the Bears actually still find a trade partner to shop Nick Foles, or is he going to be stuck on the roster? Again, that may be a question that gets answered this month during the draft or later on come training camp if the NFL quarterback landscape changes and someone needs a quarterback, perhaps. But as it sits right now, April 1, and what we heard earlier this week, I would like to see if they can find a dance partner to make this move happen, free up a roster spot, free up some cap room, maybe get a little draft capital at the same time. So that's one of my bigger questions right now. Nick, how about you?
I think when I look at just some of the things the Bears still need to do, I look at what can they possibly do in free agency still. And then we kind of touched on it a little bit at the top of the show. I still would like to see them bring in some type of veteran, either at the tackle position or wide receiver. It doesn't have to be someone that's ultra productive, but you can bring in some of those guys and the value that they bring just in terms of the experience that they have, what they could teach to the younger guys at the positions. I think that is valuable. And a guy that I'm just going to throw a name out here, and I'll get torched later in the chat, but if the Bears the Bears, had a good deal here and it worked out for this player, AJ Green, does that do anything for you in terms of what he can maybe add to the wide receiver room, being an outside threat? He's going to be 32 years old. It's not the answer by any means. And, according to PFF, he's only played 458 total offensive snaps over the past 2 seasons due to injury. But since 2011, only Julio Jones, Deshaun Jackson have more receiving yards on passes 20 or more yards down the field. And surprisingly, last season, despite being a down year, 54 receptions, 848 yards, and 3 touchdowns. The Bears could have used something like that, somebody like that, to pair with the Darnell Mooney. But again, that veteran presence is what I'm really getting at here. And being an outside threat for Justin Fields, it wouldn't be the worst thing. Like, if the Bears were to go do that, I'm like, all right, I see it. It makes sense.
Oh, for sure, without a doubt. Again, 11th in cap space right now. So will the Bears make any other, quote, notable moves? We'll see. And I think this will be the time for it to happen. If they're going to get anyone that, riles up the fan base or at least gets us excited about, there's still some of those players out there, like you just mentioned. Let's see if any of those moves kind of come to be. Another big question on my mind right now, right? Next week begins the voluntary offseason program. So how does that go? Honestly, do players, are they coming in? Are they going to stay away and do their own training right now? They don't have to show up, but which players do? And how well does that core kind of start buying into what Eberflus is starting to kind of build here? And the Bears do get a start earlier than most teams because of having a new head coach. So I'm just really curious to see how this offseason program gets started. Can it do it on the right foot? And what kind of momentum and headway can the Bears make, not just from the culture building standpoint, but also getting Justin to sit down with Luke Getsy and all right, this is what we're looking at right now. This is what the offense is going to, kind of how we're envisioning it being shaped out to be. It's the same thing with the defense, Coach Allen Williams and Roquan Smith getting to know one another. Those are some big things that are going to happen here, hopefully this month. Depends on who shows up and who doesn't. But that off-season voluntary workout in general, I'm just really curious to see how it'll all unfold. Mason, any other big burning questions?
I don't think I have another burning question, but I think something that's, I'm going to go a little contrarian to something that you said, Will, where that, some of these veteran signings might be coming in soon. I feel like it's going to continue to be slower as it is, as teams are now still moving towards the draft and saying, what can we get there? And then you're going to see a big rush of those signings afterwards. Do you sign an Xavier Rhodes now, or do you wait and see who do I get right in the draft, and then I'll plug and play an Xavier Rhodes? Because the Bears did that before last year, right? They signed a veteran cornerback, and not necessarily, his fault. He had some family stuff he had to go deal with, but he ended up not being around for training camp and things like that, and then was taking reps away from these younger guys. So, if there isn't a big push right now, a rush to sign some of the, I already said, an Xavier Rhodes, a Jarvis Landry may fall into that conversation. So some of these veterans, can you wait it out? An AJ Green likely is going to be there waiting for you post-draft. do you need to sign him today?
For sure, Mason, it's great to have you back on and kind of, have this reunion to end the week. It's been a lot of fun. I wish we had more than an hour. We can talk Bears football all day, but I need to kind of wrap things up. But I just want to say thank you for, making the time here to join Nick and myself, and I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. This was amazing. Super, super fun, reminiscent of what we were able to do before. And, I'll be here whenever you guys need me.
Sounds great. I'll tap into you, as much as I possibly can. But I want to thank everyone here for tuning into this episode. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you never miss an episode of CHGO Bears, as well as all the other teams that we cover here on the channel each and every single day. Make sure to get on the action with a membership at allchgo.com. That allows you to get into our Discord, unlock some of those written articles like my Marcus Jones breakdown that came out earlier today. And make sure to follow at CHGO_sports and at CHGO Bears on Twitter. I just want to let everyone know, just have a great weekend. I will see you Tuesday. Nick, Adam, and Olin will be back with you on Monday. But until then, bear down, Chicago.